when life starts pressing from the inside. Pause for a moment. Not because you are confused, not because you don't know what to do, but because something inside you is tired of running on autopilot. Take a slow breath and really look around. Not the quick glance you give every morning, but the kind of look that notices what you've stopped seeing. The room where you wake up, the space where you work, the environment that silently absorbs your doubts, your efforts, and your unfinished plans. Now ask yourself something honestly, without trying to sound optimistic or strong. Does this space reflect the life you want to build, or the life you learned to tolerate? Many people live with a strange pressure inside their chest. It's not despair. It's not failure. It's something quieter and heavier. A feeling of being almost there, almost changing, almost stepping into something bigger. But almost stretches into months, then years. And that's when it starts to hurt. Because you are trying, you are learning, you are investing in yourself. You didn't give up. And still, progress feels slower than it should. Opportunities feel delayed. Life feels like it's moving, but you're standing still. Here is what most people misunderstand. Life does not respond to desire alone. It responds to consistency, to what is being reinforced every single day, emotionally and physically. The human body is wired to repeat what feels familiar. Familiar does not mean good. It means known. And when your environment keeps reminding your nervous system of old emotions, old limits, old roles, the body assumes nothing has changed. That is why effort alone eventually exhausts you. You can want growth with all your heart, but if your surroundings still speak the language of survival, your system will resist expansion. Not because you are broken, but because your body is trying to keep you safe. This is where most people push harder instead of looking deeper. They add more goals, more discipline, more pressure, but expansion does not happen by force. It happens when space is created. This is not a video about motivation. It's not about convincing yourself to believe harder. It's about honesty. Because freedom does not come from comfort. It comes from clarity. If you feel a subtle discomfort right now, a quiet resistance, or the urge to explain why this doesn't fully apply to you, don't push it away. That sensation is awareness waking up. It's the moment when the old structure starts to feel tight. Before anything new can enter your life, something old must leave. And the first layer of this process is not mystical or abstract. It is practical, visible, and often underestimated. It starts with what you choose to keep around you. What you keep around is quietly deciding your future. Let's talk about something most people underestimate, dismiss, or treat as superficial. Objects, not in a materialistic sense, in an emotional one. Look around again, not quickly, slowly. The clothes you haven't worn in years, but still keep just in case. Papers from projects that ended long ago. Books you no longer open. Gifts tied to people who are no longer part of your life. You don't keep these things because they're useful. You keep them because they represent a version of you. And that matters more than most people realize. Every object holds memory, and memory carries emotion. When your eyes land on these things, your nervous system reacts automatically. Not logically, chemically. The body remembers the emotional state connected to that phase of your life. Struggle, uncertainty, compromise, survival. And here's the critical part. The body does not understand time the way the mind does. For the body, memory feels like the present moment. So even if your conscious mind wants growth, your environment may still be telling your body, stay here. This is familiar. This creates a silent contradiction. You say you want more, but you live surrounded by symbols of, this was as far as I could go. And life responds to signals, not intentions. That's why people can think positively, set goals, visualize success, and still feel stuck. The message their environment sends is stronger than the words in their head. Napoleon Hill spoke about habits of thought shaping destiny. What's rarely discussed is that physical objects are extensions of those habits. They anchor identity in place. Here's a rule that may feel uncomfortable, but it's liberating once you see it clearly. If something does not represent who you are becoming, it no longer deserves space in your life. This isn't about throwing everything away. It's about honesty. Ask yourself this without defending or explaining. If someone walked into your home or workspace today, would they see signs of the future you say you want, or a carefully preserved version of your past? Now notice what object came to your mind the instant you heard that question. Not the most logical one, the immediate one. That object carries emotional charge. Releasing it isn't loss. It's closure. It's a declaration that says, this chapter served me, but it no longer defines me. And when physical space begins to open, something subtle but powerful happens. The mind starts to loosen. Old justifications weaken. Inner narratives begin to surface. Because objects were only the outer layer. Beneath them live the stories you've been telling yourself for years. And those stories are what truly shape your destiny. That's where we go next. The stories you repeat are quietly shaping your destiny. Once the physical space begins to change, something uncomfortable tends to happen. The noise inside gets louder, because when the environment stops distracting you, the mind starts revealing what has been running quietly in the background all along. Not loud thoughts, familiar ones, repetitive ones, the kind that show up when things don't work out exactly as planned. This always happens to me. I'm just not good with money. My situation is different. I'll change when things calm down. These phrases don't sound dramatic. Sometimes they even sound reasonable. But they are powerful because they feel true. And whatever feels true eventually becomes familiar. Whatever becomes familiar turns into identity. Carl Jung warned that what remains unconscious doesn't disappear. It doesn't rest. It directs your life while you call it fate. These stories are not harmless commentary. They are instructions being fed to your nervous system again and again. Every time you repeat a story, you reinforce a character. And as long as the character stays the same, the storyline cannot change. This is why so many people feel trapped in loops. The year changes. The goals change. But the emotional ground feels identical. Here's what most people don't realize. These stories were once useful. They helped you make sense of uncertainty. They protected you from disappointment. They gave you explanations when you didn't have control. But protection slowly turned into limitation. The mind prefers consistency over truth. If a story has been repeated long enough, the system treats it as law. Not because it's accurate, but because it's familiar. And familiar feels safe. That's why simply thinking positive rarely works. You're trying to place a new narrative on top of an old one that has been rehearsed for years. Without interruption, the old script always wins. Here's a practical shift that creates real leverage. Choose one story you are willing to stop repeating. Not all of them, just one. The one that appears most often when you think about money, progress, or your future. The next time it shows up, don't fight it. Fighting gives it energy. Instead, notice it, name it, and consciously decide not to continue the conversation. Silence is often more powerful than argument. This is not denial, it's direction. You may not control every thought that passes through your mind, but you do control which ones you feed. And what you feed becomes structure. Structure becomes behavior. Behavior becomes reality. As these stories begin to loosen their grip, something deeper starts to feel unstable. A subtle sense of, who am I without this explanation? And that question leads directly to the next layer. Because behind every repeated story, there is an identity that learned to survive by believing it. And that identity is next. The identity that once saved you and now holds you back. At some point, the stories you repeated for years stopped being just explanations. They became who you are. Not who you truly are, but who you learned to be in order to survive. There is an identity you probably carry with pride. The strong one, the responsible one, the one who handles everything alone. The one who doesn't break, doesn't complain, doesn't depend on anyone. This identity didn't come from ego. It came from necessity. Maybe there was a time when no one else could carry the weight for you. When being strong wasn't a choice, it was the only option. And that version of you did its job. It kept you moving when stopping felt dangerous. It kept you functioning when things were uncertain. But here is the part most people never stop to question. An identity built for survival is not designed for expansion. Every identity comes with invisible rules. Rules about how much you're allowed to want, how much you're allowed to earn, how much rest you deserve, how much support you're willing to receive without guilt. As long as you define yourself by what you endured, you limit what you allow yourself to create. This is why growth often feels uncomfortable right before it happens, because it threatens the identity that kept you safe. Letting go of that identity feels like losing control, like becoming reckless, like tempting fate. But safety is not growth. Safety is maintenance. Napoleon Hill emphasized that decision is the most powerful force in human psychology. And the most difficult decision is not choosing what you want to achieve. It's deciding who you are no longer willing to be. You don't need to destroy the old version of yourself. You don't need to reject it or judge it. That version deserves respect. It carried you through moments you don't even talk about. But respect does not mean permanence. You can honor who you were without continuing to live from that place. This is where many people hesitate. Because identity feels solid, it feels like truth. But identity is learned, it's conditioned, and what was learned can be updated. As the grip of this identity begins to loosen, something interesting happens. You start to notice how much of your life is organized around protecting it. Your routines, your space, your decisions, even your clutter. And that realization leads to a powerful shift. You begin to see your life not just as a series of events, but as a structure, a space, a place that can either invite the future in or keep it waiting outside. That's where we go next. Your life is a house that ran out of space. At some point, a shift happens. You stop seeing your life only as a sequence of events and start seeing it as a space. Imagine your life as a house, not a perfect one, a lived-in house, with rooms you know well, corners you avoid, doors you keep closed without thinking too much about why. Every object you kept from the past occupies a room. Every story you kept repeating closed a door. Every identity you protected blocked a window. And slowly, without realizing it, the house filled up. This is why so many people feel suffocated without knowing exactly why. It's not that life is attacking them. It's that there's no room left for anything new to enter. The future isn't being rejected. It's waiting outside. Life does not break down the door. It responds to availability. This is where many people misunderstand faith, manifestation, or even effort. They believe that wanting something deeply is enough. But desire alone doesn't create space. Intention alone doesn't move walls. Words alone don't clear rooms. Action does. You can say you're ready for growth, but if every room in your inner house is filled with reminders of who you were, the system reads one thing clearly: there's no vacancy. And here's the uncomfortable part. Most of the clutter isn't obvious. It's not just objects. It's emotional furniture. Old expectations you still carry. Old disappointments you never processed. Old roles you still play because they once kept you safe. Carl Jung spoke about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we don't integrate, but still organize our lives around. In this house metaphor, the shadow isn't hidden in the basement. It's everywhere. It's in how the rooms are arranged, the way you live your days, the way you schedule your time, the way you say yes when you want to say no. All of it takes space, and while the house remains full, something important keeps happening. You keep asking for change, but subconsciously signaling maintenance. You keep asking for expansion, but reinforcing containment. This is why growth often feels frustrating right before it happens, because the solution isn't outside. It's structural. You don't need a new dream. You don't need a new strategy. You don't need to become someone else. You need to clear a room, and not symbolically, practically. One room, one space, one decision that creates real availability. Because the moment a room is cleared, the house changes. Air moves, light enters, energy shifts, and the system responds. In the next step, we stop talking in metaphors and move into action. Because awareness without action becomes another form of clutter. The question now is no longer why your life feels full. The question is, what are you willing to let go of first? The moment you actually create space. This is where things stop being conceptual. Up to now, awareness has been growing. You saw the patterns. You recognized the weight. You understood why your life felt full, even when nothing dramatic was happening. But understanding alone does not move energy. Action does, and not massive action. Precise action. Creating space does not mean clearing everything. It means choosing one thing that truly matters and releasing it deliberately. Not in your head, in the real world. This is where most people hesitate, because letting go sounds simple, but it touches something deeper. It forces you to admit that something once necessary has expired. An expiration is uncomfortable because it reminds us that versions of ourselves have life cycles. So let's be very concrete. Choose one object, not the easiest one, the meaningful one, the one you've kept for emotional reasons, not practical ones. The one that represents a phase you survived, not a future you're building. When you choose it, notice what happens in your body. There may be resistance, tightness, justification. That reaction is not weakness. It's attachment revealing itself. Now choose one story, one sentence you've repeated for years. The explanation you give yourself when things don't work out. The phrase that protects you from disappointment, but also limits expansion. Decide that this story ends here, not because it was wrong, but because it's no longer useful. And finally, choose one identity to thank, not to destroy, to release. The version of you that endured, that carried everything alone, that did what was necessary when there were no better options. Thank it, and let it rest. This is not loss. This is precision. You are not removing random pieces of your life. You are curating it. And curation is a form of leadership. The moment you do this, physically, emotionally, symbolically, something shifts. Not dramatically, quietly, but deeply. Your nervous system registers availability. Your mind registers clarity. Your environment registers change. And life responds to that signal. This is the part most people misunderstand about manifestation, effort, or growth. Reality does not respond to desire. It responds to space. It responds to coherence. It responds when what you say you want finally matches what your life is, prepared to receive. You don't need to chase the next opportunity. You don't need to force momentum. You don't need to convince the universe of anything. Once space is real, movement becomes natural. In the next phase, we talk about something subtle but decisive. The signal you are sending now and how life interprets it. Because whether you realize it or not, something has already been communicated and the response is already on its way. The moment you actually create space, this is where things stop being conceptual. Up to now, awareness has been growing. You saw the patterns. You recognized the weight. You understood why your life felt full, even when nothing dramatic was happening. But understanding alone does not move energy. Action does. And not massive action. Precise action. Creating space does not mean clearing everything. It means choosing one thing that truly matters and releasing it deliberately. Not in your head, in the real world. This is where most people hesitate, because letting go sounds simple, but it touches something deeper. It forces you to admit that something once necessary has expired. An expiration is uncomfortable because it reminds us that versions of ourselves have life cycles. So let's be very concrete. Choose one object, not the easiest one, the meaningful one, the one you've kept for emotional reasons, not practical ones. The one that represents a phase you survived, not a future you're building. When you choose it, notice what happens in your body. There may be resistance, tightness, justification. That reaction is not weakness. It's attachment revealing itself. Now choose one story, one sentence you've repeated for years. The explanation you give yourself when things don't work out. The phrase that protects you from disappointment, but also limits expansion. Decide that this story ends here, not because it was wrong, but because it's no longer useful. And finally, choose one identity to thank, not to destroy, to release. The version of you that endured, that carried everything alone, that did what was necessary when there were no better options. Thank it and let it rest. This is not loss. This is precision. You are not removing random pieces of your life. You are curating it. And curation is a form of leadership. The moment you do this, physically, emotionally, symbolically, something shifts. Not dramatically, quietly, but deeply. Your nervous system registers availability. Your mind registers clarity. Your environment registers change. And life responds to that signal. This is the part most people misunderstand about manifestation, effort, or growth. Reality does not respond to desire. It responds to space. It responds to coherence. It responds when what you say you want finally matches what your life is, prepared to receive. You don't need to chase the next opportunity. You don't need to force momentum. You don't need to convince the universe of anything. Once space is real, movement becomes natural. In the next phase, we talk about something subtle but decisive. The signal you are sending now and how life interprets it. Because whether you realize it or not, something has already been communicated and the response is already on its way. The mirror has already changed. At some point, there is nothing left to explain, no new concept to understand, no technique to apply, no next step to overthink. There is only recognition. The recognition that something inside you shifted, quietly but permanently. Life has always been a mirror. It never argues. It never negotiates. It simply reflects what is available. When things felt blocked, it wasn't because life was against you. It was because the reflection was accurate. What you were holding, what you were repeating, who you were protecting. That was the signal. And now the signal is different. You didn't force it. You didn't demand it. You didn't chase it. You made space. Space where tension used to live. Space where explanations used to sit. Space where old versions of you quietly retired. This is why the shift feels calm instead of explosive. Because real transformation rarely announces itself. It settles. It stabilizes. It integrates. You may notice that certain things no longer trigger you the way they used to. Conversations feel cleaner. Decisions feel simpler. You stop tolerating what drains you. Not because you're trying to be strong, but because it no longer matches your internal state. This is alignment. And alignment has a very specific quality. It doesn't need validation. You don't need anyone to agree. You don't need permission. You don't even need certainty. You feel grounded without explanation. Carl Jung once suggested that individuation, becoming who you truly are, doesn't happen by adding more layers, but by removing what is false. What you've done here is exactly that. You didn't create a new self. You revealed one. And once something is revealed, it can't be unseen. This is why there is no going back to pretending. Not because you're forcing growth, but because the internal structure that supported the old pattern no longer exists. The house changed. The rooms opened. The windows let light in. And now the future doesn't feel like a distant goal. It feels like something that knows where to enter. Napoleon Hill spoke about definiteness. The moment desire becomes embodied decision. Not spoken, not declared, lived. You cross that moment quietly. And life noticed. From here on, things will continue to rearrange themselves. Some slowly, some suddenly. Not because you're manifesting harder, but because resistance has less to hold on to. You are no longer asking life to change. You are responding differently, and that changes everything. If this message resonated, it's not coincidence. It means you were already at the edge of this shift. The words didn't create it, they confirmed it. You are not waiting for the right moment. The right moment has been waiting for you. The field has already heard the signal. Now it's time to live as someone who knows that space has been made. Reality is a mirror, and the reflection changed. Because you changed,